So here our next problem. We want to solve the sine x minus 2 cosine squared x plus 1 equal to 0 equation. And in the test paper, we restricted the value of x from 0 to 360 degrees. Okay, so how do we solve this equation? So the strategy that we will use is that whenever you're given an equation involving two different functions or trigonometric functions, you need to rename one of them. Okay, so how do we do that? Renaming them requires the concept of identities. Okay, so I see a cosine squared x here, and I know that sine squared x plus cosine squared x is equal to 1. Now, because this is a true statement, this is an identity, cosine squared x is the same as 1 minus sine squared x. That's why from sine x minus 2 cosine squared x plus 1 equal to 0, this is equivalent to sine x minus 2, and the cosine is replaced by 1 minus sine squared x, and then you have the plus 1 equals 0. So notice how I change the cosine squared x into 1 minus sine squared x. That's the only change happened here. You see the plus 1 is there, you see the sine x is there, you see the 2 is there. Okay? So once we do that, you can already see that the equation is converted into an equation that involves sine function only. Okay, so to continue, we use algebra to simplify this. This is 2 plus 2 sine squared x plus 1 equals 0. Then again, continue simplifying. So this means sine x plus 2 sine squared x minus 1, combining minus 2 plus 1, and then equals 0. From here, try to arrange in such a way that the sine has a decreasing degree. So from square and then to sine x, then minus 1 equals 0. Now the next thing that you have to do is to temporarily set a value for sine x. This is actually an optional method, but just to simplify the solving of x without thinking of the sine function, you can rename the sine as y. And if you do that, what will happen is that, focus on this equation, it will transform into 2y squared plus y minus 1 equal to 0. So again, you're trying to forget the sine x for the meantime and focus on solving for the y. So this can be solved by factoring. So you have 2y and y, 1 and 1. I could make this plus 1 and minus 1 here. So try to check if the factor is correct, okay? But you should get this too. Okay, so this means 2y minus 1 can be 0, or y plus 1 can be 0. For 2y minus 1 equals 0, y must be equal to 1/2 by doing some algebra, and then y is equal to -1. Now note that y is just a temporary value for sine x. So you can now return the value sine x as a replacement for y. So this is equal to 1/2. Y is sine x, so sine x is equal to -1. And then try to solve each equation. You have x to be sine inverse of 1/2. x is sine inverse of -1. Now there are two ways to continue solving this. You can do it manually, or you can just simply use a calculator to find the inverse of the values. Okay, so we have the sine inverse of 1/2 is 30. So you have x equals 30. And then note, there is another possible value for x. So this is 30. And then the sine is a positive 1/2. This means the angle can also be on the second quadrant because sine is positive here. And then we find the angle on the second quadrant with the reference angle of 30, and that angle should be 150 degrees. On the other x, the sine inverse of -1 should give us -90. So x is -90. Now, since were given a restriction that x can only be from 0 to 360, so we cannot take -90, but we can actually transform it into a positive angle. Okay, so -90 is measured in this direction, but its terminal side is on this negative y-axis. So to make -90 positive, we should measure it in a counterclockwise direction, and that will be 270 degrees to replace -90. Okay, so is there another angle whose sine inverse is -1? Now note that sine is y over r, and 90 is one of the angles located on the axis. So all our options can only be 0, 360, 90 degrees positive, 180, 270, which is already one of the answers. So you have these 4. So you can check whether sine 90 is -1. If the answer is a yes, then x is also equal to 90. So if we check that, sine 90 is actually +1. Sine 180, check that with a calculator, you get 0. You double check sine 270, that's definitely -1. The sine of 0, again, use your calculator, you have 0. So the only x here is 270. Okay, so to sum up, we have x equals 30 and 150 from here, and then we also have 270 degrees from here. So the values of x are only limited from 0 to 360, so we already have all the angles that we need. Okay, so a quick recap on how we answered this. This is a special type. So note that we needed to change cosine into sine so that the equation can be expressed only, or it can be written in sine function only. And then we simplified the expression until we got this, and we decided to temporarily assign y for sine x. We came up with an algebraic equation. We solve for y, and then we return the value of sine x afterwards. Okay, so from there, all you have to do is to solve each sine equations until you got all the possible answers. Okay, so that's it.